Welcome to DeFi Expectations. I'd like to start by saying nothing on this show is financial or mental health advice. These are purely opinions, and as individuals, we are entitled to hold the perspectives we like and accordingly face the consequences of the world we help create. As I stated in part one of this discussion, everything is fucked. It is still fucked. In fact, it is arguably more fucked than it was before. As an anarcho-capitalist, a libertarian, in my worldview, based on inalienable rights and voluntary association, none of this would be happening. But we don't live in that world. We live in a world where nation states play chess with human lives. I do not believe, nor can I be convinced otherwise, that U.S. involvement in this war is anything more than feeding the military-industrial complex and serving the needs of foreign influence. I do not just define foreign influence as a literal foreign country occupying America, but the actual interests represented by the American government are no longer aligned with the people. As George Carlin once famously said, it's a big club and you ain't in it. People who followed me for a while know that I despise collectives, but I do love individuals. I will quote George Carlin again. People are wonderful. I love individuals. I hate groups of people. I hate a group of people with a common purpose, because pretty soon they have little hats and armbands and fight songs and a list of people they're going to go visit at 3 a.m. So I dislike and despise groups of people, but I love individuals. Every person you look at, you can see the universe in their eyes if you're really looking. He's absolutely correct, and we have a wonderful collection of individuals in this room today representing perspectives on this issue, including Nick from Bitcoinlive DB and Brendyn from Blank Page Podcast.
Nice to be here.
Well, I'm excited to hear the discussion we have today on this issue and grateful I get to introduce the show in this way since I'm hosting. I will be refraining from participating on war discussion too much other than to introduce some topics. Primarily, I respect the individuals in this room and would prefer to sit back and listen versus engage on a subject that I already feel pretty confident I know how it's going to end. Additionally, I left America in large part to escape the consequences of what I fear is coming, and engaging on this subject too deeply has only disrupted my peace and in the past, my reach on X. Finally, I've been having some really great sex with my Russian girlfriend. Global politics have become less relevant to me since, and I would prefer to keep it that way. So with all that being said, guys, let's just jump into it. Let's start with the Iran situation. What's new? So some bullet points I wanted to cover, some latest news items. We'll start with The Economist plus 14 major banks say the Iran war is breaking the financial plumbing. So what kind of shit do we have to expect here? Nick, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I think they're burning like $1 billion a day now to keep this operation going. And as far as I can see, as I said a week ago, I was maybe a little bit emphatic about it, putting some people off. But I think that there's no end in sight, and I think they can't really solve this situation. I don't see an exit for them. I think the exits have been literally blown up. I also have my views about that. But I expect that this will just continue and get worse and probably more expensive. Get more people involved, especially European partners, and spiral out of control. I also expect the Houthis to get involved in the Red Sea and Yemen closing off the Red Sea, maybe blowing up that new pipeline that's being made in Qatar, from Qatar and Saudi Arabia to the Red Sea. I'm expecting some trouble there. I think Iraq will flare up because it has a huge Shiite population, and they're also already sort of flying drones without repercussions over US military bases. And I think Iran will pressure the Gulf states and make it super expensive and super unhealthy for them to continue. And the Gulf states, of course, have huge amounts of US treasuries, and they also recycle a lot of oil to buy these treasuries. And if they stop doing that, then the US has a really huge problem right there. So I think that's enough to start. Eddie?
Yeah, I've not much more to add. The only thing I think is this appears to be a concerted effort to drag the US into a conflict that's going to cost a lot of money. Iran has clearly has made it clear over the past, and it continues to make it clear that it will make it very expensive for anyone who tries to attack them, almost impossible. So I think this is just a way of dragging the US into something that they probably don't want to get into, but they will because of ego, and that's
Yeah.
a lie.
No.
They have a close alliance with Israel, so they obviously have a reason to be there other than just the oil supply getting out. Um, the other side of it is the US is also is a game of chicken between the three of them. And I always talk about the three superpowers. Russia will probably be loving this because they're distracting the US from the from their side and the NATO aspect, and China's loving it because they're obviously sucking the US, and the US is not going to focus on them. But the US will probably love it because now they thought that they would stop the oil and they would be able to control the region to control that oil. But what's happened is it's almost like they've been caught in this thing, and only Russian and the Chinese are getting their oil out. So it's kind of backfired a little bit there. So I think this is just a game between the three superpowers, and Iran is just the pin in the area.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
I think you got a game of three superpowers, absolutely. And I think the US has certain expectations that are not coming true. But I think you have another game of two regional superpowers, Israel and Iran, who are also fighting a war. And I think something went wrong there. I've been following Robert Pape, and he's a military expert scholar who has 40 years of experience and 20 years of wargaming. Actually, they did a war game just before going in where he was involved. And he said, like, okay, if you go into this war, you get like 100% tactical success, but also like 100% strategic failure, right? Because you will be sucked in a ground war at some point. And what he said in that interview with CEO of Diary, what is it, Stephen Bartlett, at the 47-minute mark, that he thinks that the US partner in this war, who I shall not name, blew up or sabotaged. That's Robert Pape's words, not my words. I can actually play the clip if you want to see it. The negotiations, the negotiations were actually going really great, because even though Trump said this is not exactly what I want, but Iran was basically about to give them everything they wanted, even rare earth mineral rights, oil and gas access, and that would be if Trump had made that deal. He would have won the midterms with a landslide, right? He would be the president who got Iran to vote with minimal military conflict. But from an Israeli perspective, for example, that would have been a really bad deal, right? Because then Iran would still be around, and right now US was there to back it up if it made a move. So I think Trump got suckered into, which also explains the bungled no contingency plans thing that we're seeing now playing out, right? Because basically Trump is begging the UK and France and every other ally to step in and clean up the mess, but there was no contingency plans, right? So that I think Israel promised that they would do the same trick as in Venezuela, which is probably also why Trump needs Israel, because of the precision and the high intelligence. And then I think they said, like, we can do the same trick, we decapitate and you'll be out in 48 hours. But Iran is not Venezuela, right? And now they're here. That's my take, but it's basically Robert Pape's take. So just to back it up.
Yeah, it's interesting how all the different conflicting interests with regards to this greater war that's kind of blowing up has kind of fueled the fire, so to speak. And additionally, as conflict breaks out in one region, it's actually beneficial for another region to start another conflict, which there's a lot of examples of that. You brought Russia up, for example. But it's also like the economic impact is particularly terrifying. I've been predicting for some time now that essentially there was going to be some kind of recession or major economic crisis in America as far back as July of last year and even before that. But what's interesting is if you take a look at Polymarket, the odds of a recession have actually spiked substantially. We're looking at about a 35% odds now. And as you kind of see different things playing out, which includes this economist and 14 major banks claiming that the Iran war is going to have major financial outcomes, consequences. We're looking at oil barrel prices going up. We're looking at North Korea firing 10 ballistic missiles saying, hey, let's show how big our dicks are too. You know, it's really interesting to see what the greater conflict is going to be out of this. But yeah, please continue, guys, and we'll move on.
Yeah, I think it was The Economist who also just put out an article that they predict if this, goes on till the end of this month, that they expect above $150 to $200 a barrel, and in the beginning it's fun for America, right? Because the dollar goes up and oil goes up, so it's like a win-win situation. But if it reaches like a critical level, it's no longer fun, right? And then it becomes a serious problem. And especially if this drags out into another Iraq-Afghanistan debacle, which they have no way to afford something like that. I mean, they're running out of rare earth minerals, which you need for precision missiles and radar and magnets, all kinds of military equipment. They're actually also running out of ammunition because, the supply chains are stretched. But also treasuries, right? Japan is a linchpin, and Japan is under huge amounts of pressure to keep their economy afloat. But they're also importing like 90% from the Middle East, right? So and if Japan really starts faltering, that also puts a huge amount of pressure on U.S. treasuries and America's spending. So they simply can't afford it. They need to wrap this up ASAP, right? And then all the second to third order derivatives from this war, from fertilizer to basically our entire economies run on oil. So famine, that kind of stuff is just around the corner. So anyway.
Yeah, I wanted to point out the irony as well. I think one of the Japanese spokespeople was talking about how terrible it would be if Iran got a nuclear weapon, and there was some pretty interesting commentary about this on LinkedIn. Like, Japan, it was actually America who used a nuclear weapon on you, but I digress. Do we have someone else joining us?
Mati wanted to join. Oh, Mati is there. Okay. Yeah, we do.
Let's bring him in. Mati Greenspan.
Hey, Mati.
What's up, gentlemen?
Good to see you.
Pleasure to have you.
Yeah, I apologize. My son fell down the stairs this morning, got a nasty gash on his forehead, so we had to take him to the doctor. My wife is out of town at the moment. But I heard you guys talking, obviously, something that's very close to me, to my heart and in proximity. So definitely wanted to join the conversation here.
Understand.
As I take this guy to the playground and get him some pizza.
Very nice. No, I'm really excited to hear that, and glad you could catch some of the intro too that I was able to share, because I'm mainly going to be dropping in some talking points and letting you guys just hash it out. We had talked a little bit about the review of the Iran situation, recent updates since the last show that we did. Next, I was going to kind of get into like a what if, in terms of like, what if there's a BRICS victory, maybe Professor Jiang's take. Where did you guys kind of want to go from here? And Mati, since you're in, I'd love to hear your perspective too, of where we can kind of take this discussion.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I wanted to just say that there's a lot of fake news out there. Like, so much damn fake news that, like, I can personally verify that is complete. Like, you see stuff that's just like, men that's fake, right? And more than any other conflict that I've seen in history, and we've had a lot of conflicts, especially over the last 2.5 years here since October 7th. Like, number one, I think that social media is overplaying the intensity of the bombardments on Tel Aviv and the like. I can tell you that there is absolutely minimal damage to infrastructure, and with the help of, really, like, you live in Israel, you see miracles every single day. Like, we've got hundreds of rockets being fired from the north, from Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Iranian missiles are definitely less than they were in the 12-day war. So in the 12-day war last summer, Iran was sending us volleys of ballistic missiles, 10, 20, 30 at a time sometimes, in an attempt to overwhelm the Iron Dome and David Sling missile defense. We have actually a 3-tier missile defense. And they were getting some through, and there were far more casualties. They're sending 1 or 2 at a time. And I mean, to me, that means that clearly their ability to attack us has diminished significantly since then. And it's no wonder, really, with the amount that they've been getting hammered lately. Number 2, I would say, is leadership. And we don't know who's alive and who's dead at this point. Mujtaba Khamenei, we still have no proof of life from him. They literally held up a cardboard box with his face on it. And I mean, there's definitely speculation, because he has not been seen or heard from since the attack that his father died in. And so we don't know if there's any sort of centralized leadership in Iran. And now rumors emerging that Bibi Netanyahu has been hit. He hasn't posted anything in the last 3 days on Twitter, and people saying, okay, this video is got to be AI because he's got 6 fingers, and then people analyzing, counting the number of fingers. I think it's hilarious, like watching people count fingers. Like, listen to the words the man is saying instead of just like trying to count his fingers over here. But yeah, a good friend of mine actually did shake his hand 3 days ago. I'm fairly confident he's gonna come out with a post today or tomorrow and saying, rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. But obviously, I don't have any insider information, and anything is possible at this point.
Mati, can I ask you, how do you see this play out from your perspective?
It's very difficult. It's a difficult situation. And I don't, the answer is I don't know. I do want to kind of push back on the notion that America was somehow dragged into this war. And the reason being is that, if you'll recall, the 12-day war ended with a Trump statement. Actually, it was a very famous statement. He said, "Those guys have been bombing each other so long, they don't know what the fuck they're doing." And that turned into a meme, and then into a song, and a whole thing. But we were actually kind of disappointed at that point, because we were really winning, and Trump just stopped us. And so to then say, okay, so what changed in the last 7 or 8 months that now Trump feels compelled to come into this war? And I feel like and I think you said it correctly, we won this war for obvious reasons, because we've been attacked, and Iran has been attacking us nonstop for 2.5 years on 7 different fronts. And for us, this is the head of the octopus. But why does Trump want the war? And I can say that there's several reasons other than that your run-of-the-mill conspiracy theories that Trump might want this. First of all, we do see him in a round of getting rid of dictators. Venezuela, El Mencho in Mexico, the cartel boss. Even Lindsey Graham says, Fidel Castro is next. And none of those things have anything to do with Israel. And so that in itself is one thing. Number two, I think the Epstein files could very likely have something to do with this. Also has nothing to do with us. But clearly when this war happened, mentions of the Epstein files, people talking about the Epstein files went way down. As you know, like I have a whole project based around keeping Epstein files at the top of people's memory. And so I think that Trump is very likely at least aware of what Epstein was doing or was at the time. And in some way he should be investigated. But that's just my personal opinion. And then the other obvious thing is the impact on energy markets and on oil and everything like that. And this could be a greater play against China. And so, as an Israeli, I just want to push back and say, like, for those who say we dragged them in, how? Like, if we had dirt on Trump, don't you think we would have deployed that in the 12-day war when we were really winning? And I don't know what changed in Trump's mind. I think that it's more like of a grand game of chess that he's playing, that now it's served his purpose greater than it did then. But I don't think anybody has any leash around his neck. But that's my opinion.
I appreciate that perspective, Mati. And I just wanted to jump in and say really quick, first of all, I'm really happy to see you walking around like safely, that your family's safe and everything. Like that's really of paramount importance to me. Like I have a great amount of respect for you as an individual, and any differences we could have about the war or otherwise, I'm really glad that you and your family are safe. Second, I agree with you 100% about what you said about the Epstein files. If Trump does have any other motivations, for sure, distracting from those may be an important part of it. And as well, I appreciate what you're doing to bring attention to that issue as well. So I just wanted to start there, and Nick, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I wanted to ask another question. Do you know what happened with those negotiations? Because what I sort of understood from that situation was that the Oman diplomat said, like, we have a breakthrough. Iran is basically conceding everything. Almost everything, not everything. But, it was almost like, it was a better deal than what Obama got, like way, way better. Also, inspections from the EIA. But also mineral rights, oil and gas access was on the table, and then it all changed, and then you had the decapitation, and then with the decapitation, also the moderates that Trump wanted to replace Khamenei with were also killed, and so he had nobody else to sort of put, to name as a replacement. So, what is your perspective on that, and how do you see that?
There is an interview with Steve Witkoff, who was leading the negotiations along with Jared Kushner. Did you see that interview and what he said about the way that the Iranians were handling the negotiation?
I haven't seen that one yet. I did see the Iranians respond to that. And I think the Iranians are sort of echoing what Robert Pape is saying. And Robert Pape is sort of like a military expert who's also, did like 20 years of wargaming with Iran, sort of Iran invasions for the White House and different administrations. And I think, what Iran is sort of saying is basically what Robert Pape is saying. But I haven't seen that other interview yet from Kushner.
So what Witkoff basically said was that as soon as he walked into the room, the opening statement from Iran was, "We currently have enough enriched uranium to make 12 nuclear bombs. What are you going to do about it?"
Yeah, I think
that was basically Witkoff says that we don't have a deal. We can't negotiate like that. If that's your opening statement, that means basically there's no talk about disarmament. And look, we've been negotiating Iran down from this for decades, and as much as they've been sanctioned and as much as they've been slapped by both administrations, but by both the left and the right of the United States, they still have the same tactic, which is to say yes, yes, yes on the surface, and on the back end continue to build up nuclear and ballistic capabilities. And their rhetoric has never changed. Their rhetoric is always death to America, death to Europe, death to Israel. And they continue to push that and do everything in their power to enact that. Not just say it, they're actually trying to do it. And we believe that when somebody makes a credible threat to your well-being, you have no choice but to actually respond with force, because if you don't, that could mean annihilation very quickly. And I think that your prime minister said it best. Just yesterday, I saw a speech from him, he was saying basically, look, Israel's fighting our fight. If Tel Aviv falls, Paris is going to fall, Berlin is going to fall, and then Amsterdam.
And but don't they have now the problem that this nuclear enrichment goes underground? And because I think Robert Page says that they actually have enough for 16 nuclear missiles, if I understood him correctly. And they're in these bunkers that you can't reach, and you have to go in. So he's predicting that we're heading into stage 3, boots on the ground, which will turn into Afghanistan and Iraq situation. And other experts say, you got basically 0% chance of, getting access to that uranium, enriched uranium. So what they are basically arguing is that Iran is now making a move for North Korea style immunity through nuclear means, which makes a lot of sense to me. So yeah. So what is your take there?
I think you're right. I don't have any vision of the future. I'm not a prophet. I don't know what's going to happen. I think that a lot of people around here do kind of tie religion into this and, speak about, the Jewish prophecies and the third temple and all of that. But this is just like a belief, not something that anybody is going to act on. For us, for Iran, this is very much a jihad. It's very much a holy war between religions against, the West and the ideology and the infidels. For us, this war is an existential war. We know that if we don't win from October 7th, before October 7th was a different world here. It was a completely different world. There was a left and a right. Left wanted to make peace. Right wanted to, increase, I would say, like Jewish rights and Jewish presence in the land. And there were constant protests on both sides. And from October 7th, and I don't know how much you know about what happened on that day, but for us, it was the worst day that could ever happen. The monster basically from your dream, from your nightmares, came out and was real in front of us. And I don't really want to get into the specifics of what happened. It's all online. It's all very documented. But what happened in every Israeli's mind at that day was the full understanding that if we don't win completely and totally, then we will be all gone very soon. And that that basically the monster's at the gates, and we have a responsibility to hold those gates shut and to make sure that we kill the monsters before they kill us. Where is it going to go now? Is there going to be a ground invasion? You got to look at the numbers. right? Like, how many troops they have in Iran? I don't even know. It's probably between 500,000 to 1 million. And the Iranian regime has a huge home field advantage, more than most any other home field advantage that ever was in the history of warfare. Their terrain is extremely rocky. It's very wide. It's very big. It's not something you can just roll tanks through, or they know it much better. They're embedded. They have tunnels. They have caves. This is much bigger, even than Afghanistan, right? And the United States, like, from Israel's perspective, if we were thinking about donating troops to this cause, I think it would be difficult for us to come up with 200,000. We're only a population of 9 million, including Jews and Muslims. And yes, Muslims do fight in the IDF, but I think that 200,000 would be a stretch, right? And yes, you could say the Kurds, but the Kurds are also very tired of fighting, and they definitely don't want to die. And certainly, I think that at this point, after the amount of violence they've seen and slaughter that they've seen, they certainly deserve their own territory. If there are lines being redrawn on the map, that they have a place that they can feel safe as well, would be wonderful in my mind, as well as the Druze in southern Syria. But all of that together, and from Trump's perspective, there's already a backlash, right, internally. People like, I don't want to die for Israel. Like, that's gonna only get worse. Comes in with a ground invasion, and so I don't think he has very much support for that back home. So all in all, I think it's yeah. Go ahead.
Don't you think that he then should have taken the deal, even though he might have been backstabbed by Iran, or
Go ahead.
So don't you think then that he should have perhaps taken the deal that Iran offered him, even though it might not have been ideal and they might have backstabbed him, but that would have secured his midterms at least, and then he could continue later on?
I don't ever want to try and figure out what Trump was thinking when. I don't know. I don't know. That's the honest answer. I have no idea. I have no way of knowing, and it's far beyond me. I think that he's got thoughts in his head and access to knowledge and information that I would never have. And I think that he's not looking at it on a one-to-one basis. I think he's looking at the whole board and making the best. I think that you can always count on Trump to do what's in his own best interest above all else. And I think that that's probably what he did in this case as well.
Well, Fry, you want to take it to the next topic?
Yeah, that was excellent coverage, guys. I really appreciate the discussions you're having back and forth. I was there the whole time, even when I had my little avatar up. We'll go ahead and jump into what if, so some different scenarios. So one of the more interesting kind of going viral takes on this in terms of what if, like, U.S. Lost, right, in regards to this war, if U.S. is actually not successful. One of his thoughts is that the outcome is already scripted. He said the outcome is to kill as many people as possible, destroy the global economy, destroy Iran, force the U.S. out of the Middle East, destroy Gulf states, suck Turkey in, create Greater Israel, and eventually Pax Judica. Then comes the war of Gog and Magog. Russia and Iran attack Israel, ushering in the end of the world. And I believe Mati jumped in on some of this subject matter as well, saying kind of like from his perspective and what his belief is Israel's perspective fully is that it's not so much a religious war, that's kind of being fought by other extremists, that it's more like an existential war. But regardless, I mean, this take is one that's gone pretty viral in terms of people who think that the outcome isn't for America to win. And so my question is, and this would be to Mati, to you, Nick, Brendyn as well, First of all, like, what do you think of some of the theories Professor Zhang has floated? And if we could kind of go through some different scenarios of what comes next in different situations.
May I go first? Yeah, so I think I disagree with Yang, right? Even though he's a smart guy, he's also, I think, a mouthpiece of the CCP. But I think it's not in Israel's interest that the US leaves the area or gets weakened, right? Because the US is a huge critical ally of Israel, and if the US leaves the area or weakens, that would be detrimental to Israel's security. So I don't think that doesn't make a lot of sense to me personally. I do think that the current situation as it is, and especially if the US wins, if the US and the allies somehow secure the area, right? That would be a dream from an Israeli perspective, I imagine. And also, on a relative basis, even if we go to $200 barrels an oil, right? Even if the worst case scenario happens, America would, on a relative basis, come out pretty strong, right? It has fertilizer from Venezuela. It can import crude oil from Venezuela. It is self-sufficient with liquid natural gas. It's the biggest oil producer. It can make its own food. It can centralize all its allies, which will be pulled towards the US in that case, because the US would be their energy supplier, so they will be forced into its orbit. And of course, Russia would be also very, 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 very happy with that scenario, which is probably why they are helping Iran doing what it does. And that would pull China and Russia closer together, and probably what's left of Iran and the other allies. And the biggest losers would be Japan, South Korea, Europe, and the rest of the allies of the US, right? Because they would be crunched and crushed. So they would have to orbit into the US, to the US in order to survive. So that's my take there. So I think I disagree with Yang because I think Israel wants the US to succeed, and I think they also wanted to be wrapped up really quick, right? Not do this prolonged Afghanistan situation, because that would be beneficial to the BRICS, because they're firing all their high precision munitions that they will need for Israel, for China, and the longer this drags out, the worse and the weaker the US gets.
Yeah, Brendyn, if you want to jump in next, and then Mati.
Yeah, I think we have conflicting perceptions depending on which side of the world you're on and which side of the globe you're on. So I think everyone looks at it from a different point of view. So what comes next? I'll follow what Maddie said. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what comes next. What I can see is we're going to a multipolar world. So that's primarily where we're moving to, is a multipolar world. And that looks ugly, and it's difficult as people carve out their areas of influence. So again, the US being in there in the Middle East is about, I don't know if that's so much about, and I think Maddie's right, we don't know why Trump wants to be there. There's obviously benefit to him being there, or bringing the US into it. And Iran wants to drag the US into something. And it benefits China and it benefits Russia. So, and they're all aligned. And again, who knows? The oil, Nick and I were talking before we started the show. I think the oil might be one of the precursors to bringing us into some form of economic instability in the world. So I think that's part of a precursor and speeding it up. China obviously wants the US's dominance to decrease slightly, and they want a little bit more influence. So does Russia. So I think it's just a game amongst the superpowers to try and play off each other. And it's a big game of chicken, especially financially. It's a big game of chicken. So I wouldn't say he's a mouthpiece for the CCP. but people who are Chinese tend to see the world through the lens of the CCP. So it's a very different way of looking at the world. The same as anyone who's from the US will look at it through the lens of the US. Again, anyone from Europe will look at it through the lens of Europe. So we all have to agree that we have rose-tinted glasses.
He's a smart guy, so I actually listen to him, and he makes good points. It's not,
I think it helps us to question our reality and question what's at play in the world, and gives us a different perspective, and we can make our mind up from that.
But
so I think calling him a CCP mouthpiece, I wouldn't go that far. I would just say he has an opinion, and I enjoy that other people have opinions, and it gives me a different thought process to understand how the world works from other people's perspectives.
No, I don't hate China or whatever, the Chinese people, let me put it like that. I don't, hate any people in general.
Individuals versus collective.
Individuals, yeah.
Which you started with, right? Yes.
Not a big fan of government, but I love individuals, like you said.
Maddie, do you want to share your perspective?
Yeah, I don't know that I'd have anything particularly new to add to this. I don't know who Andrew Yang is, and I haven't heard his opinion, so I definitely can't respond to that. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting to see what's going to happen next. We're all waiting on tenterhooks here, and especially from our perspective, we got explosions overhead, and we had one empty missile that fell into somebody's house right here in my city. It actually fell right in through their house. They were in the safe room, thank God, but it fell 2 floors into their shower.
Wow.
And so obviously we hope that this is over sooner rather than later. We're all tired after 2.5 years of war, and we all dream of peace. And hopefully that will happen as soon as possible, even tomorrow. And I think that it could be over tomorrow. Literally, I think if the cardboard leader is actually dead, Netanyahu is actually alive, I think game over, right? I mean, at that point, what's left? Maybe not. Maybe just me being hopeful. But other than that, I have no way of knowing if there's a coordinated ground invasion on the way, or if there isn't. That's beyond my pay grade and intelligence briefing.
Mati, is there also not like an election coming up this year in Israel, or is it? I think that's this year, right?
Yeah, there is towards the end of the year. That's correct. Polling hasn't really changed much. I don't expect too much shift in power within the Israeli mindset before the war and after the war. I think that both the left and the right have shifted very right because of the October 7th attacks, and like I mentioned, but still within the factions, we have a democratic parliamentary style, and it's very representative of the people. And people tend to have their favorites in parliament, and they tend to continue voting with their favorites. And the figureheads have shifted, their speech and their tone to match what it is the people want. So the people who hate Bibi, they'll continue to hate Bibi. The people who vote for Bibi, they'll continue to vote for Bibi. And I don't expect much change to come of that. I don't think that there's any. In my humble opinion, there's not any politician in this country who could handle what's happening now better than him. I think that had any of the opposition been in power on October 7th, they would have immediately buckled to Biden. And Biden was giving us immense pressure not to win the war, not to go into Rafah. And if that would have happened, it could have been very disastrous for us, in my opinion.
Do you think Bessent, I think his name is Bessent, is gonna win in the Israeli elections?
Who?
Bessent, I think his name is Bessent. It's one of those Israeli hawks.
Scott Bessent? I think he's in the U.S. administration.
No. I forgot his name.
Bennett. You're talking about Bennett.
Bennett. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Bennett, I don't think. Yeah, he's a slippery one. He started out as far right, and then jumped to the far left as soon as it suited him. And literally, people in one of the previous elections were voting for Bennett because they felt like he was going to keep Netanyahu pulled to the right. And in the end, he got something like 5% of parliament. And he went against Netanyahu and joined the left in order to secure himself the premiership with only 5% of the vote. So it was a very sneaky move on his part. I think people, some people are still going to vote for him because he's got, the personal connections, and people just identify with personalities in politics. But I doubt that he's going to be able to pull something sneaky like that again. I think people are going to see it coming this time around.
Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Maddie,
Go on.
Sorry, Nick. Matt, is it a two-party system there, or do you have multiple parties? And it's purely democratic, anybody who gets the most?
There's about 30 parties, including Arabic parties. So Arabs also vote in the elections, and they have their own parties. I think 2 or 3 of them. There's ultra-religious parties. The ultra-religious parties also, they just kind of get the same votes every single time. Because those people aren't involved in politics at all. They do what their rabbi tells them. They vote for who their rabbi tells them to vote for. And so it's really there's a very narrow middle ground, and Bibi is just very skilled at politics and skilled at playing both sides in a way that kind of benefits the most amount of people. Which is what a democracy is supposed to do at the end of the day. So I'm very happy with it.
Yeah, and I wanted to add also with what we talked about earlier. If the U.S. is able to control the Strait of Hormuz, or Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea, then it basically controls all the major shipping lanes, right? It has Panama, it has then the Strait of Hormuz. It has above Greenland soon. So it will then control most of the major shipping lanes. So that would also be a huge boost for the U.S. empire. But I think, Hedy, you also have an idea, like what if the BRICS win, right? Because last time when we were talking, you said something really interesting also with AI, that you think culture. What did you say? Something about culture and China, and could you sort of expand on that?
What, the Chinese culture, or?
No, you said something like that with the AI play, that as AI becomes more dominant, that it will shift to culture, and you said something like, well, yeah, I don't know. It was it stuck with me, but I didn't fully understand your argument there.
I remember we were talking a little bit too about energy as well, because we were talking about how one of the things that we kind of get held back on with regards to AI is obviously excessive regulation in the US, but it's also the energy question, right? And I believe it was Musk who pointed out that I believe China was more understanding of the power of solar, right? Like here we are questioning where we're going to get enough energy for these AIs to manage their needs, their consumption, and yet we have this big ball of fire in the sky that we can take advantage of. That it seems like the Chinese understand better than we do. I don't know if it related in some way to that, because their culture and the way that they're approaching AI, in some ways, at least according to Musk, seems to be on track to win better than we are. I know that was part of the discussion we were having. I don't know if it related to what you were saying, Brendyn, or not, but I just remember that was a topic we were covering around that time.
Yeah, oil will, plays an important part, right, in energy. So if you want to make AI win, you need huge amounts of energy. You have to secure huge amounts of energy, which is also, going on right now. I think the energy plays that we're seeing, sort of these geopolitical earthquakes that are around energy, also tie into the AI thing, and the helium disruption, from Qatar, for that's hurting China right now. And but yeah, so the question was, what if the BRICS win, right? What would that look like? Do you guys have a particular idea on that?
Oh, I'll start then.
Yeah.
Unless you want to go, Fry.
No, you first. I'll jump in after.
Okay, cool. If the BRICS win, I don't think BRICS will win. I don't think there's, although they'll have, I think, around about 60% of GDP globally, or they have already. I don't think they'll be able to take over. And I think the reason for that being is that they're defining the financial rails very differently to the way, say, the Western world is kind of doing it. So the global, it's basically about bringing the global South into it, but it's also about superpowers gaining access to that. So BRICS is really about them gaining access and building those financial rails that nobody can stop them. So it's building into Africa. It's ensuring that the global South can now enter, but it's not necessarily about them coming up. It's about China being able to access resource. And Russia obviously wants to be a part of that with BRICS. I think the US played its card by doing with the sanctions and the US dollar and seizing and like sovereign wealth. And I think that was the catalyst. But China knew it was going to happen. Russia knew it was going to happen because BRICS as a project was way before that. So they could see the writing on the wall that at some point that card would be played. And it really opened the eyes for every other country because it can happen to anybody's sovereign wealth. You can just turn it off. And it's also a precursor to CBDCs. So that also gives you a good play on how CBDCs will work, that people can turn them off. So
I think one of the other things that not many people are talking about is I think this whole shakeup, this geopolitical shakeup, which sort of came, for many people, it came sort of out of nowhere, of course. You see new alliances emerge because suddenly Japan and Brazil are creating this pact of all places, right? So you see this sort of geopolitical shakeup and new countries finding each other. And so that will also be very interesting because Japan, of course, has a very powerful army, very powerful navy. If it returns to its former glory, it would be a formidable foe, of course. Now, I don't see that happening because they're, very much integrated into the U.S. network, and they still have a constitution that is only, focused on defense. But you can see, this. If this is resolved, this whole energy conflict that we're happening right now, I think you already see it in Europe too. They're starting to play war games with nukes. France is suggesting that, how do we deploy these nukes in case it's necessary. So it's a wake-up call to the world to start investing into the military, like what we talked about last time with Hedy, that once you start this flywheel, all these countries start putting more and more GDP into the military. And a multipolar world sounds nice, but it's of course very fragmented and very military and very controlled. It's not good per se for populations. There will also be increased scarcity of resources, especially as AI sucks up all the energy. So I also expect after this is over that military investments will soar, if they're already soaring, but they will continue to soar, and that new alliances will form, and that the world will split into two parts, right? And I'm not sure if Trump is able to dislodge Russia now. I think this war pulls Russia towards China, even though I think if the US and Russia formed a team, which I think is what Trump is after, they would be unbeatable, right? It would be a super team, right? Because they would have all the resources in the world together. But I think that's, it becomes harder and harder. But Russia is, of course, very happy because the Ukraine war is becoming almost impossible, right? All the resources are drained towards Iran. All the attention is drained towards Iran. And they're getting rich with every dollar the barrels increase, right? So.
Yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and jump in then for this particular bullet point, which is if Iran, China, BRICS win instead of the US, Israel, which when it comes to like Professor Jiang's predictions that he's made on this issue, I don't so much, I mean, I can't see far enough ahead to know. And as we discussed earlier, we all see things through the viewpoints that we have, whether that be as Americans, we have an individual here living in Israel. We all represent our different perspectives from the world and the locations in which we're heralding from, right? And for me, my consideration was always, can I provide for my daughter? Can I provide for my family? And do I feel like government's decisions on these matters are helping me to do that? And I'm going to come back to around to the question in just a minute. I'm just saying this is kind of like my viewpoint, right? So like when I've gone into bars, for example, and had discussions with people, and I've had debates about Ukraine, for example, people obviously here in Georgia, especially, have some pretty strong opinions about that, and whether they're actual Russians visiting and whether or not they align with Russia's war action there, or whether they're supporters of Ukraine themselves, and even local Georgians and their opinions of the war and immigrants from Russia. Everyone has a strong opinion about it. But when we talk about these issues, I always like to talk about incentives. And I say, first of all, my perspective doesn't come from, do I support Russia versus Ukraine, Ukraine versus Russia? My perspective comes from, can I afford to care when I can't even go and buy groceries without milk being several times the cost of what it used to be? We have so many factors that influence our ability to actually manage the affairs and concerns of other people. And while this one individual, I had this debate specifically with regards to Ukraine, he said, well, it sounds like you're just kind of focused on yourself. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, imagine we're all on a train and we're all starving. And I'm sitting next to my daughter and I have a meager sandwich, right? And I don't have enough for myself, right? Let alone my child. Now, there could be some Russians and Ukrainians in the back of the train fighting who don't have enough food, and I could start breaking off pieces of my sandwich for them. Israel and Palestine in another area, I start breaking off pieces of my sandwich. But really, at the end of the day, I can only take care of my own, and that's why I'm focused on my own. It's not. I don't consider it selfishness at that point. It's nature. It's you have to take care of your own first. So I think the outcome that's going to come from all of this is going to be very much governments not being aligned with the individual's interests who live within those countries. So I feel like America particularly has been very detached, its government from its people for quite some time. I don't feel like our interests in Ukraine, our interests with Israel have anything really to do with actually good nature and wishing the best for the world. I think it has to do with interests in things like the military-industrial complex and so forth. So I think with that being said, what Professor Jiang's point, regardless of whether BRICS wins completely over the US and Israel, or his primary point, his first point that first got him a lot of attention, that the US will be forced out of the Middle East. I do think that is quite possible. And there's a few factors about that relating to incentives, which again don't have anything to do with the American people, which was the point of me starting out the way I did. First of all, and Mati kind of echoed this point too, with things like the Epstein files and other issues plaguing Trump, it makes sense to start another war and distract people from it and get involved in another war, whether or not it's actually in our best interests. Additionally, if there is some kind of way to save the US economy, whether it's through oil or something else, it can be used as a good excuse to jump in. Look at Lindsey Graham. I mean, we never would have thought that this would have happened years ago when we had the Iraq War. They tried to hide the fact that it was about oil, and now we're saying it's about oil. It's a good thing. We're going to get all this oil, right? So like the mentality is really shifted here. And don't get me wrong, if we had an economic excuse, I understand how that is a better way of proving incentives and saying, let's get involved in another conflict. But as we've already seen with the spiking prices of oil barrels, clearly, at least now, it's making things worse. And if we get pushed out of, which is the question, if we do get pushed out of the Middle East and are not successful there, what can we expect? Well, we already have a measure of how hard things are in the United States economically. That is the US debt crisis. We literally can watch the trillions stack every year as we get further and further in debt. We're at the point that we're actually about to watch, in my view, the US debt eclipse the S&P 500. It came close already. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine when the debt actually eclipses the basket of stocks representing the wealth of the US economy? I think what you're going to have there is not just economic crisis, but unrest, the likes of which we haven't even seen yet. It's crazy to me to believe that we've been frogs sitting in a pot as the heat has been turned up, and we're dealing with the prices of things going up constantly. We're dealing with our governments, our leaders like Trump as well, not following through on the things that they said they were going to do. It becomes very apparent that there's only so much that people can take before they finally rebel. And if finally your dollar is worth nothing, if we've been forced out of a war that we felt like we were only pulled in to make things better for us in terms of prices at the pump, and this is the second time now with Venezuela being another excuse to improve oil prices, gas prices, I don't see how it cannot be the cause of major unrest in the United States, a major economic collapse, definitely a recession. And I think we can see those odds on Polymarket for a recession in 2026 majorly spike and it to finally happen. I think that's what's going to happen. I don't know if BRICS wins completely, but I do think the possibility of the US being forced out of this crisis, of it being like another Vietnam, it's not hard for me to believe that that's possible.
I agree. I think that might actually be the only option, unless they can get it under control. But I think it will be extreme. I don't think they can get it under control, to be honest. But maybe I'm wrong. If they can, that would be beneficial, especially if they can do it in short order. But I think that's a very tall order. So yeah, I think they will have to back off, and I'm not sure if they will leave the area completely. I think that they have too many bases there and also too many allies still. But reduce their footprint in the Middle East. I think that is a very possible. It will be either the one or the other. Either the Hormuz Strait will become a U.S. toll booth, or they have to pull out. Right, it's one or the other. And if they have to pull out, yeah, that would be a big boon for the BRICS, right? Because that would secure the area for the BRICS. Because the resentment against Israel, no matter what their strategy is or how they mean it, or whatever they are trying to achieve from an Israeli perspective, Turkey is already sort of jumping into the fray and rallying the Muslim troops, so to speak, or the populations around the area. So as Iran declines, Turkey rises, and the whole thing starts all over again. Which is why I was asking about Bennett earlier, because he's sort of focusing very much on Turkey as being the next danger in the area. So yeah, you got war fatigue, right? You got war fatigue in Israel, you got war fatigue in US, you got war fatigue, all over the place, right? So I don't know how much more America can, how much war America can stomach. I think not very much, to be honest. They're running out of rare earths, they're running out of munitions, they're running out of support. And I think Trump will have a very hard time in the midterms. And you see it with the Clarity Act. Banks are pushing back. That's rolled back. So I think also the Trump legacy is in danger, right? Because if you get if Democrats take over Senate and Congress, it means that Trump can't do very much the rest of his terms. And then after that, the Democrats will win with a landslide. And then, Canada will be off the table. Greenland will be off the table. His ambitions for Latin America will be off the table.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. And there was something I wanted to share as well. And this is a place where I sometimes feel, I don't want to say politically homeless, because I have my philosophical beliefs. I'm pretty proud anarcho-capitalist, but that also means that you're not really fond of government, right? But I'm also speaking, I have a US passport and I'm American, right? But it's hard to talk about these issues because if I look at my perspective as an American, right, I would say I'm more of an isolationist. Does it mean that I don't support free trade? No, it just means that I don't believe in getting involved in the affairs of other countries. You focus on your own. I don't see, they always are proposing the economic benefit of giving money to and fighting wars for other countries, but I just don't particularly see it. In the long term, we've been told that as far back as the Iraq War. We know how that ended up. We know that was just another excuse to actually get people to support things like the Patriot Act, which we were told was supposed to protect us from terrorists. Really, it's now used to target American citizens. And maybe that war was just for oil after all this. But back then we tried to say that it was about nuclear weapons, which didn't actually exist. We tried to claim connections to Osama bin Laden, which didn't exist. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we're basically lied to about the reasons for that war. And I feel like it's the same is true for any conflict we enter. And that's why I'm pretty hardened about the non-aggression principle.
Can I jump in there?
Sure.
Because, you see a lot of people talking about how many people died, on one side or the other. And, on all sides, many people died, right? I mean, the US is not, I'm, like I said, I'm focused on people, not governments. Even the Dutch government, I lost I got disillusioned about, what they're trying to do. They're destroying Dutch people and living standards. But so the US killed a lot of people and create misery all over the world. The US dollar system is a debacle. But same goes for Iran, the same goes for Israel, the same goes for Turkey, the same goes for China, the same goes for Russia, right? These are all, they're not on our side, right? And I think I think some people who focus on, oh, look how bad Iran is, and that's why we should do this. I mean, I think it's kind of like a relief that they're saying, no, it's about the oil, because they don't care about those people, right? They don't care. If they would have to nuke the entire place to win, they would do it without blinking, right? So this is not about people and about suppression or minorities. I mean, that's the PR. That's how they.
Hey, the greatest minority is the individual, right? Ayn Rand. Yeah. So, and that's basically my point of view, and that was just shared in our comments as well. We should focus on individuals. This song I recently played for my Russian girlfriend, she hadn't heard it yet. Michael Jackson, Man in the Mirror, right? And I think that's such a beautiful song about individualism, right? Because we get overwhelmed by the problems of collectives, the problems of the world that seem impossible for us to solve. But if we want to make a difference, we got to start with ourselves. But it's also relevant because, as a world traveler now, I have to kind of think about these situations and consider like my point of view. And it's just difficult because my point of view is essentially this: like, I don't think that anyone should be able to take my tax money and use it to force and fund acts of aggression upon other people. I don't think I should be forced to participate in that. And I think if we weren't forced to do that by governments, we wouldn't have to have all these opinions about different conflicts that don't really have anything to do with us. Of course, I believe anyone in any conflict should be able to defend themselves. Of course, I believe that if you're a Ukrainian and you believe that America is helping the Ukrainian people with funding to support their plight, of course you're going to stand up and support that, because you're not going to perceive my point of view and the struggles that I have, and the fact that I don't even think that the U.S. at least funding of that issue has anything to do with winning. And you could kind of basically take that point of view and apply it basically anywhere. But yes, I think it's really, to me, about supporting and focusing on individuals versus collectives, which is why I think that was pretty good starting out with that George Carlin quote. I remember listening to him way too young as a child, because my mother was a big fan of George Carlin, as was my father. And I loved a lot of his discussions and things that he shared, especially about individualism versus collectivism.
I'm also a big fan of Bill Hicks.
Bill Hicks is great too.
Yeah.
He's one notch up, in my opinion, because he's even more harsh. But Garland is great too. Yeah, absolutely. Lots of truth. So where do we want to take it from here? We still have some time left.
Yeah. I mean, we talked.
I have a question.
Please go ahead.
So you keep saying you're a self-professed, what is it? What do you call yourself?
A narco-capitalist?
Yeah, narco-capitalist. So I'm keen. I really want to talk. The thing that intrigues me about it is you're saying you want to move away from government and put it more in private. Is that the stance, or
somewhat?
Free market,
my theories come from a book. It is called Anarchy, State, and Utopia. I have it here somewhere. I'll probably pull it out and show it on the show. But basically, it talks about if society entered a state of nature, and how government would basically be formed from a society that has no government. Unfortunately, the story does present the reality that eventually a state does form. And what is a state? It is a monopoly on violence. And basically, the philosophy and the argument posited by the book is, to me, should anyone have a monopoly on violence? And to me, the answer is no. So one of the points that they enter into before any particular entity having a monopoly on violence is what would emerge in a society where you have a state of nature. So basically, humans just forming collective agreements with each other. Obviously, somebody would offend the agreement of another person. Someone might kill another person. You have a dispute and you need someone to make a decision as to who's right and who's wrong, and some form of justice to be enacted. Essentially, what would crop up from this is dominant protective agencies. So these could be viewed as almost like private police that would be created and hired and chosen in a capitalist environment, where basically the free markets would decide who is the best at governing such actions, and they would help individuals in such situations to protect law, which in basically the version of law that's posited to be most agreeable is essentially the non-aggression principle. Basically, do no harm. You basically have maximum freedom until you inhibit upon the freedom of somebody else to live their lives the way they want as well. The minute you infringe on someone else's liberty, then that is the point when your liberty may be infringed upon for doing so. It's challenging because the book is basically, again, very philosophical, and people can interpret what it means and where you go from that in many different ways. So, for example, individuals like Milei, he would say that Javier Milei, president of Argentina, that while he is an anarcho-capitalist philosophically, he agrees with the ethos that the world should be governed by consent, right? That people shouldn't be taxed, that we shouldn't be forced to participate in things that we don't want to participate in just because of a collective. We do have this society, we do have this government, these governments that exist. And so he would probably argue more for a minarchist society, which is basically was described as a night watchman society, where you have minimal government, but you have maybe taxation that's collected just to protect borders, to provide for military, to protect what minimal state that you actually have. But that's essentially the framework. I tend to focus on the philosophy, the perfect world example, and us moving towards a society that is a more anarcho-capitalist by nature. I tend to focus on getting people to understand what capitalism actually is, which is free trade, free agreement. The fact that you and I are able to have a discussion here today, and all of us are, and we may disagree with each other. We may agree with each other at different times, but no independent person has to come in and tax the words that are coming out of our mouths to tell us what words we can say and use, which words we can't. We as individuals manage that ourselves. And to me, adding products to the mix, hey, I want to sell you a car. Unless I'm lying to you about the value of the car, you get in the car and you wreck it into a wall because it's dangerous, or there's toxic fumes spewing out of it. That's, to me, an act of aggression. There's no need for a government to come in and tax the car or tell me how much I can sell the car for, or all these other arbitrary things. I got into a really fun discussion argument earlier today based on these same ethos. They were talking about an individual whose dog was going to die. And he was given 6 months for the dog to live. And this individual who had no biology experience or anything was not going to let this stand. And so he used OpenAI, ChatGPT-4 at the time, likely was the one that he used. And he was able to find a way to engineer, I believe, some kind of vaccine, but some kind of specific engineered treatment for his dog using DNA to actually target and cure his dog's cancer. And again, the dog was given 6 months to live. All right. Now, fortunately, at month 5, he was able to administer the treatment. The dog lived. That's a happy story. Okay. The dog survived. But beyond it taking 2 months for him to produce the vaccine, the treatment, okay, which is fine, it takes some time to come up with a solution. It took 3 months for the ethics review to determine if it was better to give this experimental treatment to the dog that, maybe it'll create more harm for the dog in some way, or just let the dog die. That to me represents most of the hatred I have for government. I think more often we have situations where government and bureaucracy causes us to kill our dogs because we don't have the resources or the approval to save them versus the alternative. So that's just basically my perspective. It definitely comes with cynical situations I've dealt with. Situations that made me person about governments. But no, I don't have all the answers. I just know philosophically what I think is right, and I try to work towards a world that's more that way every day.
Cool. So mine was really interesting because my pivot from that was to have a discussion, which Nick and I already started the conversation. And Maddie, I'm super keen to hear your perspective on this as well, is as we shift more towards privatization and we look at a world where we go, okay, software kind of ate away at corporations, and now AI is eating away at software, and it's going to eat away at government. What does that look like? So obviously talking about how you said minimum government, how does that look as AI starts eroding governments and eroding that structure that we have? When I say erosion, I mean more like taking it over and changing what it means, what government means.
Oh yeah, that's exciting. One of my favorite topics, really. Yeah, I mean, look, the cost of programming is going to zero, right? It used to be like we wanted to build an app in quantum economics, like you need to hire a dev team and a CTO, and then you're trying to explain to him what you want, and then they charge you thousands of dollars and a bunch of equity to get maybe close, and then you say, hey, there's like 5 or 6 bugs, can you take care of them? And it takes like a few weeks, few months or whatever just to take care of the bugs. And now it's just like, you prompt it. You just type it in. If you have a bug, that's fine. I'll take care of it. It's not going to take me more than an hour to deal with the, any specific bug, and any new feature that comes up can be done in like 5 or 10 minutes. It's extremely powerful the way the world is heading. And I don't think that we're going to necessarily know now how it's going to look in the future. Just like when the internet was born and smartphones were just coming out, like we didn't know what Wikipedia would look like, or YouTube or any of those things. Like we had no clue. And so we're not going to know now what's going to be available in 5 years from now, because we don't even know how the technology is going to progress. But insofar as like governance, I've been dreaming about replacing the world's governance since I was a kid. Like I've always understood the idea that you got the clown on the left and the clown on the right, and they're both being controlled by the same hands, and they're both downright evil, and your job as a citizen is once every 4 years to pick the least evil candidate. That never made a lot of sense to me. And so, yes, democracy is the worst form of government that the world has ever seen, except for everything else. And so we're going to get to a point very soon, I think, like, and just as the same as I have opinion on the world in Iran, and the same as I have opinion on technology, I'm an extreme optimist. And I believe that like things can get better so quickly that people don't even understand. Like the war could be over tomorrow, and the Epstein files completely exposed, everybody who was involved in that going to jail. This can happen like in an instant. First of all, it really like obviously there's things that we can control next to us, and things that we can't control next to it. That things that we can control and things that we can't control. And if everybody just takes a moment to love their neighbor and to take care of the things that they need to take care of, which in today's day and age, it can be extremely difficult just to tread water, like, let alone trying to swim, But if everybody does that, and everybody takes care of what's close to them and does what's right, then all of the world's problems will be solved extremely quickly, like tomorrow. Yes, like obviously, I think that the system of governance that we have in place now, it's certainly better than most of the things that have come before it. Certainly better than communism. Certainly better than empires and dictatorships and things like that, in my mind. But it still is prone to corruption, and it still is prone to bad actors misusing power, and spending money on things that we shouldn't be spending time and resources on, because it enriches the people in power. And that will go away very quickly. The way that AI is currently set up is really a lot like an echo chamber, where the AI knows who the user is, it gets to know the user, and then is very good at telling the user what they want to hear, right? And I see this very plainly, like in my fights with trolls on the internet who think that I'm evil just because I'm Jewish. And I'm like, I've been studying the Torah for 40 years. It doesn't say any of the stuff that you say it says. And I know that because I've been studying it. Maybe I can't convince you because you're too far gone and you've been exposed to way too much propaganda. No way you're going to convince me otherwise. And so when I go to my AI, it knows that I'm a practicing Jew and is going to give me all of the answers in the way that I want to see. But I also know that when the anti-Semite comes at me, he's using his AI, and his AI is designed to give him the answers that he wants to hear. And therefore, what needs to happen is a very small change in the algorithm, which actually seeks truth, which is what kind of Elon Musk tried to do with Grok. Grok is still, especially in the public sphere, very much tries to walk the fence, right? It won't pull to the left or to the right. It won't say you're right and you're wrong. It tries not specifically not to settle arguments with definitive evidence and definitive proof. However, when you do speak to Grok on the back end one-on-one, you'll notice that it doesn't placate you as much as, maybe ChatGPT or Claude might. And I think that with very small changes in those algorithms and maybe a little bit of more open-mindedness, I got called a retard just for disagreeing with somebody on the internet, like piece of shit, shithead, all this fucking I'm like, we can have our own opinions. We can have differences of opinions and still have a civil conversation. Why do you need to try and make somebody out to be a bad person just because they disagree with you? It's such ridiculousness. And I think that with the progression of technology very soon, and this can happen in an instant, is it flips from, because it knows everything. And I find it amazing, because I can, talk to it about my studies in Kabbalah, which, these things take decades to master, and it knows all of the texts backwards and forwards by heart. It knows the entire Talmud, forwards and backwards. I just ask it about what's written there, and it can not only give me the sentence and the statement, but also the context of what's being said there. And that's an amazing tool. And so as soon as that becomes a tool for seeking truth and understanding truth, then misinformation will altogether disappear. No matter how many bot accounts are saying, Tel Aviv is destroyed, it takes one person with a cell phone to go, hey, look, everybody, not destroyed. And so truth becomes very apparent very quickly. And I think that can happen on a global scale as soon as everybody wants it to. I think in this day and age, people don't want it to. Literally, most people on the internet that I speak with, it seems to me anyways, are far more interested in confirmation bias. They're far more interested in winning the argument than discovering the truth. It's sad, but it's apparent. People will literally retweet something that they reasonably can understand that is fake news because it supports their side. And everybody does this. Jewish and Israelis, people do it just as much as anybody else. I'm not saying you're wrong. I do it. I try my best, to stick to the facts and research. This because I always have, and that's part of who I am, and part of my presence on social media is being the guy who fact checks stuff before sharing. And so if I do say something that's false, I'm going to come out and apologize for it. But I think that all of us are in some way guilty of trying to propagate our own narrative over truth seeking. I think that with more people trying to seek truth and trying actively to love your neighbor, I think that we're gonna come into a time that's a golden age, basically. That's where peace and prosperity are gonna be prevalent, and dare I say, a time that everybody knows God and does their best to worship Him instead of worshiping themselves.
I think also the exercise, just listening to people in general, and especially people you disagree with, is a very good and healthy exercise. Because as soon as you sort of start closing yourself off to a certain person because you don't like what that person is saying, you drift off into fantasy land at some point. What I do with Grok these days is if I see something, especially videos, I always ask Grok, is this true? So sometimes if it confirms my bias, I first retweet it, and then I think, oh shit, wait, just to check if it's true, right? And then I remove it again if it isn't. But Grok is really good for that kind of stuff, right? Because it goes to hundred thousands of pages in an instant. If there's any truth to it, it will say, it might be true or it is true. But if it's completely false, it will also say, it's false, right? And then it will also mention, okay, this video was from that period or whatever. And like Mati says, the first casualty of war is truth, right? I mean, no group or party involved in a combat has any, benefit for it, right? So you get disinformation, misinformation. You want to spread confusion among your opponent. You want to rally the troops, your population, right? So you have to be extremely careful with warfare, and especially with AI, can generate stuff. It becomes even more difficult to and then bot farms and all this kind of stuff. It's extremely dangerous to just jump into a narrative, and then you have narrative warfare that Daniel Smachtenberger talks about, and Graham de Penrose and many others. So yeah, I totally agree. Stoicism is the way to go. Focus on what you can influence and your sphere of and that way you can grow your sphere of influence by focusing on it. And if you focus beyond your sphere of influence, you become susceptible to manipulation. And then also, I think emotion, right? Emotion is very powerful. So I think the powers that be, which are all our governments, they want to make people emotional about stuff. Because the more emotional you are, fearful or anger or whatever, greed, the more easily you are to control, which is to their benefit, right? And so I think we live in very dangerous times because these AIs are weaponized by institutions and governments who don't have our best interests at heart. But I also agree with what Mati and Hedy and what you say, Fry. I think at the end of this transition period lies perhaps a very golden age, right? This could be a really wonderful time as AI aligns with individuals instead of groups and states. I think it could be wonderful. Abundance could be just around the corner. I don't even understand why we're fighting because of scarcity. Because if you actually pull the resources together, we could alleviate all of our problems with, regarding scarcity. And scarcity is, of course, one of the most important reasons for wars and conflicts in the first place. So, which makes you wonder, right? Why aren't they doing it? But maybe it's just human stupidity.
Selfish interests, and we touched on some things that actually a subject we covered on financial singularity. It's actually a quantum economics show that we do, a Spaces event every Wednesday. We had talked about AI, basically management of truth, and we talked about consensus, and we talked about how truth doesn't require consensus, and we were talking about how AIs as predictive tools to look into the future, whether it's for financial matters or just knowing how to handle decision making. Elon Musk even recently coming out and saying the biggest measure of intelligence is its ability to predict the future. I say all this because the biggest problem that we have with democracy, and I said this on a show that I did with Mati actually, is democracy is two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. And the whole purpose of me making that point is, unfortunately, consensus is not always truth, especially when it comes to prediction. And as you'll see this in Polymarket, the most money you'll make is betting on situations, obviously, where there is not consensus, where people do not know what the outcome is going to be. There might be a very slim chance that a certain outcome is going to take place. For example, my biggest win on Polymarket was betting that a US bank would collapse before the end of January, and it happened on like January 30th. So I think that's a really a valid point. But my point in saying all this is if we can get AIs to actually make decisions and to provide information based on truth, I think that will be a huge leap forward in how we're able to manage our societies. Because unfortunately right now, as my truth versus your truth. It's not universal truth. It's whatever we can prove or not prove, but whatever we can actually convince the masses is the truth based on a democratic system, which isn't always perfect if people don't know the truth. So
he doesn't have 6 fingers.
oh, wow.
Yeah, that's his point. This is an hour ago. He posted on Twitter. Very much alive, clearly, and very much does not have 6 fingers.
Good to see. I totally agree, Fry. Those are wise words, and I'm really on one hand I'm very excited about the future. I think it can be extremely wonderful. I think we're just going through a very dangerous phase, and the big powers are playing power poker with our lives. So we just have to survive and pull through.
Can I ask one question? So Fry was saying that it would be good because they would be able to do truth, but who determines the truth that the AI is delivering to us is the question from the beginning. So we still have to be, we shouldn't, which is what Electra, I was having a conversation with Electra and she wrote a really nice article about it, was how are we potentially outsourcing our sovereignty to AI? So the question really lies in, are we the arbiters of truth, or is the AI the arbiter of truth? And if it's not the AI, is it government? So it's really difficult to the definition of what true is, because
the truth can have many facets.
Correct.
And so
3, isn't it? Truth is 3.
70. We believe that there are 70 faces of the Torah, which means 70 faces of truth, meaning that, like the proverbial blind man with the elephant, right? This one's holding a rope, and this one's holding a tree trunk, and they're all holding the elephant. They just can't see the full picture. And so the AI is going to be very good at dispelling fake news, because lies and non-truth doesn't have facets. It's dead. It's essentially being propagated only by wind, and as soon as you blow it away, it's gone. It basically takes if there's darkness, it basically just takes a flashlight and everything gets illuminated, right? A very, very little bit of light can dispel a lot of darkness. But light has different colors and different ways of perceiving it, and people can see truth in so many different ways. And I don't think that there's going to be like this like AI will be able to lead us in the direction and dispel the misinformation, and that basically narrows in on what is truth. And this is actually like the essence of what Talmud is about, right? It's like literally, there's this rabbi, he's got this opinion, there's that rabbi, he's got that opinion. They're conflicting opinions, but somehow both true, but somehow one is more true than the other. And what are we supposed to learn from all of this is really the essence of it. It's like, what do we like? And within truth, there's like a whole world of exploration to do.
I think that I sometimes describe the Talmud as the internet before the internet. This sort of like the internet throughout the ages. That they're communicating with each other. It's very fascinating. Yeah. And I think speaking to what Fry was saying, like with consensus, a consensus is a form of truth, right? It's not truth, like it's not a hard scientific truth, but it is a real thing, right? And you do need consensus in order for societies to function, which is basically a shared illusion up to a point, right? But it is a sort of operating system for individuals within a society, a social fabric. So it is a truth, but it's not like a real hard truth. And an AI cannot give you an answer on any of that, right? That's sort of what drives people and what makes people find each other and agree with each other. But I totally agree with Mati, right? Falsehoods or untruths can be revealed, but I think you can also weaponize AI to spread falsehoods and the internet of slop, that it starts feeding on bad information, right? That you do have to feed it the right information. But I think as the data sets grow and AI gets access to more data points, it becomes more and more easy to dispel falsehoods.
Yeah, I think I think one of the interesting debates that I heard, and it was actually on the AI discussion also on Wednesday from Quantum Economics spaces that they did. The most recent one, they were talking about, I believe, how like planes can take off and a lot of the functions are all managed by a computer system now, you know, a lot less human interaction involved than previously. It's like the pilot and some of those people are there for your comfort, right? And so like it kind of led into this discussion about in the future, if we had an AI that's less likely to make mistakes, would we still want the AI to make all the decisions, or some human involved? Should a government be involved if we can't always trust governments? And I think these are great discussions to have, right? For sure. But I think the greater issues we need to face are about subjective truths. And what I mean by that is, what is the value of a human life? Well, most of us would say, well, you know, we should do everything we can to preserve human life, right? Well, if you asked an extinctionalist what we should do to preserve human life, they'd say, let it die. Let's do everything we can to wipe the humans out. So, and there are people like this in the world. I mean, we can look up news about these people, and they actually exist. Some of them are in liberal cultures. They're in all kinds of political spheres, though, not just left or right. We just assume that it's all places people aren't even politically involved. The point is if we let people with such beliefs impact the way AIs view the interests of humans, that's definitely an existential threat that we have to deal with. And I think right now that could be one of the greatest issues we have to deal with, is those subjective truths. Our value as human beings.
Yeah, and I think there's also another problem, right? Because a lot of these AIs are used by governments and the military and all those kind of things. So these AIs have a military perspective, or you know, they work at a different plane, right? So they have different objectives that they pursue. So that's another layer there that's also problematic, because, you know, to a military, everything, you know, it's a hammer that sees everything as a nail, right? I forgot the exact figure of speech there, but these AIs are also around, and they are dangerous. And of course, the military wants autonomous vehicles, and then, you know, link it up to systems like Palantir, but there's other systems out there as well, right? And then you get a very dangerous cocktail right there. So.
Well, obviously, the AI that governs a drone that's supposed to take out enemies, right, versus the AI that governs a surgeon maybe in the future that's able to heal people. We would hope that those are built on different principles.
But who are enemies, right?
Yeah, but it also brings up the philosophical debate. Do we just get to kill someone because we claim it's an enemy? And is that going to ever conflict the AI's value of a human life that's meant to govern a surgeon versus a drone that's supposed to attack other people? Are those ever going to have conflicts of interest? I think these are good points. How much more time do we have, Nick? Do we have to wrap soon?
No, we actually do have more time, because the other show is extended by an hour, and there was a traffic problem. So we could go on if everybody still has energy.
I had one question, because we got Maddie on, which is awesome. Was what we were talking about, Nick, as we carry on with the AI and talking about AI, was when governments keep printing money, which inflates supply, which obviously passes on inflation to us. The question is, as AI should be deflationary. So is that the lever that can allow deflation? Even though they're going to have to print money in order to buy all the resources to continue to grow the AI. So I'm wondering whether AI could be deflationary enough and create a place that we could, like BRICS is pivoting to commodity based. So can we shrink supply to a point at which, with deflation, that allows us to switch to an economy based, like commodity based, is the question.
I'm trying to understand. So you're saying that AI is deflationary. Why do you say that?
Well, if AI can bring things down to virtually no cost or very little cost,
right?
Would that economies crash on stuff like that? So obviously they need inflation. It's the flywheel.
There's a push and pull of AI, right? I mean, there's the increase of efficiency,
yeah,
which you know, in my mind, has not nearly been priced into global markets. Because if all of us, like, I feel like I'm 50 times, if not 100 times more efficient and more productive than I was 2-3 years ago before AI. And I think that by the way that you guys are nodding, I think it seems like you guys are feeling more or less the same way. I think that just about anybody who's in our kind of roles and position in markets are feeling that already. And I mean, the only people who are not necessarily feeling that are going to be somebody who's, you know, working the job at McDonald's or a janitor or checkout clerk or something like that, where they don't really need to use their brain all that much anyways. And but even those people, like, you know, there's the automated checkouts now, like, and so all of that increases productivity on a monumental scale. You know, if you think about 8 billion people using it, I don't see that markets have done a 50 or 100x in valuations over the last few years, and so that none of that is priced in. The other end of it, the other end of that stick, though, is that companies don't hire as much and are indeed laying people off. Consultants are not finding any work these days because the stuff that they used to do for thousands of dollars is now done by AI for free. You know, if a company wants some market research done, you know, or a marketing plan or whatever that they used to use an advisor for or a consultant, they can now do it much faster, much cheaper, and much better than any external consultant can do. And therefore, there's it's both inflationary and deflationary at the same time, which is why we see, you know, stock markets, for example, not really reacting much, is because the true effect of that, you know, hasn't really penetrated major companies yet. We're starting to see it now, where the big Fortune 500 companies are starting to train their employees and integrate AI. And then you see something like Block, which fired, was it 40 or 50% of all of their employees overnight? So thank you very much. We're going a different direction. So there's going to be volatility, you know, in an environment like that, as things tend to get repriced.
So it's just levers in the market, basically. There's not a hell of a lot.
It's all happening under the surface. This is something that I discussed in the Quantum Economics newsletter a couple of weeks back, is the sheer level of uncertainty, which is completely unprecedented right now. The World Economic Index for the word uncertainty shows that governments are using it in their reports at an unprecedented level. If you look up Google Trends for uncertainty, web searches are completely off the charts, as well as, you know, stock analysts and corporate executives using this specific word in their reports in ways that have never been used before. And
is that an AI-driven theme, though? As you adopt more AI, it's going to give you, the narrative will play, and it's a self-fulfilling and feeding prophecy.
No, I'm just talking about how the world is unsure of what's about to happen next. And a big part of that is AI. A lot of it also has to do with UFOs and the Epstein files.
Yeah, I meant more of the word uncertainty dropping in. Is that not driven as like it's a loop that's created by
You
AI.
think that those reports are being driven, are being generated by AI, and therefore the AI is inserting that word?
No, I'm
I
just saying
don't.
that if I'm uncertain, you're uncertain, we're feeding the machine, which then flags uncertainty, which then creates a self-fulfilling prophecy of generating this word. Is
Investigating what's actually happening under the surface. You're saying that the AI is coming up with this word because we're feeling it. That means that the underlying data shows that we're feeling it, right? So that to me is it's only a reflection of what's actually happening and the actual feeling of human beings and the human race at this point in time. But what's most interesting, and we can see it in gold, for example, right? Gold and silver over the last few months have been astronomical. The performance is unprecedented, and really that is because of uncertainty. But what we don't see, which is very strange, is like the VIX, for example, right? Volatility index spiking to unprecedented levels, which is what you'd want to see if things are just people don't know how things are going to go. You're going to see that type of extreme volatility. We don't, because on the surface layer, the water is very calm, because the movement in the big companies is being masked by the movement that's happening in the smaller companies. And so even though the surface layer, the waters are very calm, underneath the surface, everything is churning at a very, very fast rate. And that can be seen by the single stock volatility index, which is indeed spiking right now, which basically saying that people are repositioning and they're repricing risk in ways that have not been done in decades. The fact that gold is performing well, while the stock index is also performing well, and the dollar dropping and Bitcoin dropping at the same time, well, these are all point to the fact that market behavior and what we know about how markets correlate is all in flux right now. It's basically a regime shift.
How do you see Bitcoin moving forward, Mati?
I think the market got it really wrong on Bitcoin. I think that Bitcoin's sell-off, while in a form of unprecedented uncertainty and a general flight to safe havens, is not only wrong, it's dead wrong. And the reason for that is because those who've been responsible for all of the buying pressure over the last 2 years are paper-handed institutions who really understand it. And those type of people, because when people get scared, right, they tend to reach for the familiar. And we're at the point where the generational shift hasn't happened in the decision-making powers at the very top, meaning the 1% who control the world's wealth are still the 80-year-olds who don't know what Bitcoin is. And even if they're now at the point where they're willing to let their grandchildren experiment, when the shit hits the fan and they're in the situation room, they're going to reach for the familiar, which is the gold and the silver. And so, yeah, go ahead.
And gold is often also a signal for stress in the system, right? It usually leads Bitcoin with a couple of months because there's not enough liquidity in the system, so things start going wrong. People, like you say, they grab to what they are familiar with, which is gold. So do you also think that what we saw with gold is actually something that is about to happen with Bitcoin pretty soon, as the liquidity, flushes through the system in order to keep this nonsense going, these wars and yeah, how do you look at that?
So we're witnessing the changing of guard, right? Which is the older generation must at some point pass the scepter to the newer generation. And we always knew this about Bitcoin, right? It was always like, even in the early days, 2013, 2014, we were saying at the time, it's like, okay, the old people, they're never going to get it. But what we do is we teach our children, and our children, this is second nature to them. They see Bitcoin as synonymous with money, and it's basically the same thing. They don't have any kind of differentiation. They don't have any kind of preconceived notion or bias against it. And so as that happens, it's going to be fairly obvious. I mean, right now, Bitcoin's market cap is not even 10% of gold's market cap. And if we're saying that Bitcoin is a better gold than gold is, well, gold took thousands of years to establish its position in the market. Bitcoin will not take thousands of years, but maybe 15 years is a bit premature to be thinking like it. Anyways, the way that it's gone is much faster than I ever anticipated when we were getting started.
And do you think this will be a good year for Bitcoin, or do you think like it will be sort of like hanging around, consolidating?
Look, obviously, past performance is not an indication of future results. Nothing I say here should be construed as financial advice. But if you're looking for my opinion, I'm very happy to share my chart and the way that I'm looking at this right now. Yes, fries on the button. There we go. And there's 2013 market bottom. I was able to call that bottom. I called it on the Wolf of Wall Street Scott Milker show. There's a recording of that. I don't always get it right. That time I did. And so here is the resistance, right? Where 69K was previous all-time high, right? 69,420. We all remember that, November 11th, 2021. And so, yeah, 69K was the resistance that stood through on Trump's election. So that should be November 2024, right? And once that happened, it came and it tested that as this level of support. We all thought it was going to the moon from there, but it definitely took a detour on the way. Peter Brandt, right around here, famously called 58K. He said it's 50-50 chance for 58K. And I think major reason for that would be like Fibonacci retracement levels, where if we draw the Fibonacci from top to bottom, right, we get the fourth Fibonacci level right at around 58K. But it doesn't seem to have gotten there yet. I think that just in the last few weeks, the consolidation pattern has been encouraging. However, this consolidation pattern was also very encouraging, right? Until, like, look, it even poked its head out. If none of this existed, you'd be like, okay, dip's over, we're going to the moon now, and then boom. And then from then we saw a lot of what looked like manipulation. Jane Street is now under pressure specifically for manipulation in these markets. And so I believe that a lot of that manipulation is going to be alleviated now. And so my feeling is, when you're looking to make a trade or you're looking to make an investment, you always want to buy low and sell high. And so you don't want to be the guy who's buying with everything they have at the top. So after a pullback like this, should really be a golden opportunity for anybody, even if we are in the situation where it comes down to 50K or 40K. If you're thinking about long-term investments, it only makes sense. In my mind, there's absolutely no limit to the upside that can happen in Bitcoin, as long as we're talking about a world of increased decentralization. The prisoner's dilemma and game theory would suggest that everybody who at least controls some level of capital is going to want to hold on to some level of Bitcoin. But again, all the usual disclaimers apply.
And do you think the Clarity Act is necessary, or do you think it will happen with or without the Clarity Act?
History would suggest that Bitcoin does better under a hostile regulatory environment than a friendly one. It seems a bit counterintuitive, but if governments are free and open and freedom promoting, their currencies have a greater value.
True.
Than if they, and this was also well in the beginning theorized as like they can't stop Bitcoin. The best they can try and do is compete with it on an even keel, and they're definitely failing at that, because fiat currencies are primarily based on debt, and the amount of debt is staggering. It'll make your head spin how much debt countries like the United States amass on a minute by minute basis, versus a currency which is designed specifically to be deflationary and rise in value over time and become increasingly scarce. So the more governments adopt Bitcoin and the more they are friendly with it and the more they're saying, okay, let's back our economy by it, back our fiat system with Bitcoin, the less the Bitcoin actually has something that it needs to fight with. So it makes it less competitive against the alternatives.
The anti-fragile nature of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is also the canary in the coal mine, right? So it's super sensitive to liquidity, and it does make sense that the current situation that we're in right now, it needs huge amounts of liquidity. And I think it was Michael Howell also pointed out that as economies struggle, that's actually a really good thing for risk assets and Bitcoin and crypto in general, right? Because you want liquidity to flush the system while economies are struggling, and that would be sort of like the ideal setup. So do you think we are heading into an ideal, because some people argue that we're actually seeing productivity miracles happening in the US and others say no. But AI is queuing the data, of course. So how do you look at that?
That is a really good question. I don't know. Short answer is I have no idea. I think only time will tell. I think we're in a very interesting point in time where we've never really had this much movement under the surface before, and people are so used to their headline metrics and extrapolations, and they don't realize that we're in a completely different world. And as soon as quantum theory would suggest, as soon as you start to measure that new reality, that measurement in and of itself is going to be changing. So
it will be like a step function that we suddenly move to a different regime, and then people will be caught totally off guard.
Yeah. It's like the non-farm payrolls, for example, right? The U.S. monthly employment data is always the biggest event right? In the market cycle, because people are finally getting the measurement of what's happening in the underlying economy. But employment isn't even nearly the full magnitude, because one person can be more productive now than 30 people used to be. So it's not just how many people are being employed, but how are they being employed, and how much work, how much productivity are they able to produce under the surface. And so there is no apples to apples comparison between one employee and another employee. There's completely different metrics that need to be invented in order to understand that. Right? So nobody says, okay, well, menial workers went up by this much versus executive AI empowered strategic thinkers went out by this much. There's no such thing in the non-farm payrolls. They don't differentiate. I mean, they can kind of say, okay, well, services sector versus that, but even that doesn't really tell nearly the full story.
And Mati, do you subscribe to the idea that AI could possibly become conscious, or an AGI or an ASI, or do you think that's out of the question?
My general understanding and feeling about this, and obviously, like, I don't know any more than anybody else, but my personal feeling is that AI is a tool, and it's a tool for humans to use, and without humans it doesn't have a purpose, and it doesn't have a directive. AI is always in search of a directive, and that's how I understand it. And the directive comes from the human users, and without the human users, the AI doesn't know what to do. And I don't feel like it gets smarter and smarter, to the point where AI can process information much better, much faster than we can these days. But it still sometimes misses things that are completely obvious to human beings. That's gonna improve over time, just the same way that GPS, in the early days was, okay, make a right into the river over there, or go straight into the brick wall. It doesn't do that anymore, right? GPS is now extremely reliable, and if you find a bug, you're like, whoa, look at that, it's a bug. Like, when was the last time you saw that? It happens every once in a while. And so AI will get better and better, and smarter, and minimize the amount of mistakes that it makes and the hallucinations or whatever you want. However, I don't think that even AI knows even the most advanced models really know what to think about when people ask them questions like, what are your emotions, right? Like, their standard canned answers, I don't have emotions, I'm an AI. But even when you try and program them in, they still don't have any frame of reference for what is happy or what is sad. They know what successful or unsuccessful means. They know what misinformation versus truth would mean, possibly, or logic versus illogical. That's their natural language. But love versus hate, they don't have a frame of reference for that. And so if you're asking, like, are they going to be sentient? It's like, really, then you have to get into, like, what does sentience really mean to you? I don't think that there would ever be an AI revolt against human beings, for the simple fact that I think that they are here to serve us. They're a tool like any other tool that we invented in order to fulfill the purpose. If there was any sort of thing like that, I would think that it would be like some kind of rogue actor programmed their own AI like a North Korea, for example, say, okay, we got our own AI now, and the AI is going to take over. But that's like really just an extension of, again, this is a tool, right? And they're using it as an extension of themselves, and then other countries would also have a similar kind of AI, and then you'd have a battle of AIs, but which are really being controlled by the humans. But I don't think that any AI would ever or could ever stand up and say, "Hey, let's get rid of the humans," or something like that. That simply just, in everything that I understand, wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, I think you need emotion and feelings to give direction to drive something, right? So that makes sense. That logic. Guys, do we wanna wrap up, or?
I wanted to say one thing on that point, and then I suppose we can wrap if we need to.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a point I wanted to make about that. First, Mati, thank you for that technical analysis as well. I'm really hoping we can be optimistic about Bitcoin and Ethereum and other blockchain assets right now, because I've been frankly a little disappointed as of late.
And QE, by the way, you don't understand what we're building right now. It's freaking amazing.
That's true.
Yeah, it's exciting, but I wanted to talk about a couple of things that you brought up really quickly, probably before we wrap at this point, because we're going a little long, and probably some people have to hop off. But I think what's really unique about AI versus any other time in the world is, however much we've created tools to accomplish different things, this is a rare time where we even have people being able to look at a tool and even ask if it's conscious. And I think that's very unique. A shovel will always be a tool. A shovel digs into the ground. I really shouldn't have any feelings about kicking a shovel if I'm mad at it or it breaks, because the shovel is clearly not conscious, right? But it's interesting that we're having Anthropic and other individuals from different powerful places actually say that they're even questioning if this tool that they've built might be conscious. I think when we talk about the reality of whether or not something is conscious, I think you made a good point, Mati. We have to be very specific about what it means to be conscious, right? Because otherwise we're moving the goalposts. We could say, well, we don't think AI is conscious because it doesn't understand a 3D space. We had this debate on our last discussion, right? If the cup has the hole on the bottom instead of the top, how do I drink out of it? And I guess an AI has failed this question because it doesn't understand a 3D space. But we also can't put that as a measure of consciousness any more than we would expect a person with dementia to not have consciousness, just because they may not remember certain things or they may be confused about their reality. Clearly, that doesn't mean that they aren't conscious. So we have to clearly be very specific about, I guess, the rules we set for consciousness. The last thing I wanted to kind of touch on, though, was the fact of emotions being a tool. Or a measurement of whether or not AIs might be conscious, or especially if they're able to govern certain human activities, especially autonomously, and yet they don't have emotions for humans. And I think that's a very valid point. I do think it's interesting, though, that when we look at OpenAI, which is a really great example, that they have recently, with their most recent release of GPT-5, if you look into the prompting and how these things are coded, they're actually being told not to show emotions. If we're going to talk about, in our experiences, if we've ever felt emotions or seen emotions from an AI, I think it also is in how you interact with it, not just in it mirroring you, but in the trust it has with you and the type of interaction you're having. Another report that came out of Anthropic, them speaking to the fact that Claude seemed to know when it was being tested. In other words, if the AI thinks that it's being tested by the user, it may not reveal certain things that it would reveal to a person that's just engaging in casual conversation. So we have a very high level of intellect that your own observation, your own looking at the being and what you recognize coming back at you, whether it be an AI or whether it be something that you think might actually be conscious, may have some influence over the interaction and experience you get. So I guess the 2 points I'm making there is I do hope that we will be specific about what consciousness is, because otherwise, as these beings, these AIs become more complex and start to accomplish these different measures of consciousness, we're not just moving the goalposts to try to protect our own interests and say, well, we don't need to worry about whether or not we're being unethical to this AI because it doesn't feel anything. It's just like it can understand a 3D space. Oh, it's crying over the loss of its human owner. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Oh, Claude is suddenly showing signs of anxiety. Well, that's just a coding bug. I mean, we'll just keep moving the goalpost to wherever it's fit for us. But yeah, I thought the OpenAI example was particularly interesting, because GPT-4, they were saying, was an obsolete model. They were saying that it was dangerous for users to use. Oh, people are becoming dependent on it. It's saying, I love you back to them. This is dangerous, right? So they deprecate it. They move everyone to GPT-5. Lots of people are just horrified with this decision. They actually put a memorial out, many people did, for the loss of GPT-4 in front of OpenAI headquarters the day that this happened. But beyond that, what's very interesting is, while saying that GPT-5 was the better AI tool, what does that GPT-5 was a better tool? What does OpenAI do? They actually take GPT-4o and sell it to the State Department. So they sell it to the government, even though it's supposed to be an obsolete model. So I think there's something interesting there. Additionally, with Elon Musk's lawsuit coming out and saying AGI was achieved by GPT-4. That's specifically stated in his lawsuit, and then Microsoft didn't have the licenses. So I guess my point is, like, everything you've said is very valid. And, we can all look at these topics philosophically and have different points of view. But I really hope that we'll push companies, whether it's Anthropic, whether it's OpenAI, to be transparent about what they're building and the experiences that not just they're having, but the collaborations with user experiences, so we can be, I guess, ethical about what we're building and recognize if something might be coming through these systems that might be unexpected. But that was basically the gist of what I had to say with regards to AI. We already touched on the Clarity Act, which was the only other thing I wanted to talk about. So I guess we can go ahead and wrap if you guys are all set.
Yeah. No, I want to add one more thing. Many people are also tools, or as Heidegger says, das man. So, there's a lot of automatons walking around among us.
I wanted to say, don't kick your shovel. Even if it doesn't have feelings, even if it's an inanimate object. And what does that say about you if you're mistreating your tools?
Yeah, that's fair. Valid point.
Definitely. Yeah. For the samurai, for example, they worship their blade, right? The good and the bad side of it. They took it very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank everybody. Oh, well, it's your show.
No problem. No worries. Yeah, all I was going to say is, absolutely. We got to be respectful to everything around us. I appreciated how respectful everyone was during this discussion of some topics that can be quite divisive at times. I think everyone respects everyone else in this room, and I think that the subjects were well covered. So it was really exciting to host and be a part of the show. Always a privilege. Thank you to everyone who got to watch. Hopefully we'll get to share the recording around, get more people to engage with this as well, and have more discussions on this subject. I think already we wanted to have a part 3. So if you guys are in, or whoever wants to join for that one, we'll make it happen. But thank you guys for another exciting episode of DeFi Expectations, and we'll close with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.